sister-in-law Snooped to steal our baby name before I gave birth, failing to realize I outsmarted her with a decoy choice. I 33F have been married to my husband Kevin, 35 male, for 5 years. We have a 3-year-old daughter and I'm currently pregnant with twins, M and F. My Bill Terrence, 38 male, has been married to his wife Jess, 39F, for 7 years. Jess and I are total opposites. Jess is an extrovert. She's kind of loud, boisterous and some would even say abrasive. I'm an introvert. I'm not quiet or shy, but I am reserved. I'm also very observant. The first time I met Jess, I told Kevin that we would be like oil and water. We have never been overtly hostile towards each other but also have never gone out of our way to bond. Unfortunately, Terrence and Jess had fertility issues for several years before finally having their son a couple weeks ago. Prior to this, Jess was very odd towards us when I was pregnant with our daughter. The best way to describe it is hot and cold. One minute she pretended like she didn't care while we were talking about it at family gatherings, the next she was volunteering to throw the baby shower. I gave a firm no to that. We both assumed the behavior was because of their fertility issues and didn't think too much of it. But the strangest thing she did was almost demand to know what we were naming our daughter before we announced it. She asked us constantly after our gender reveal and got visibly annoyed when we just laughed her off, and said it was a secret. We couldn't understand why the hell she cared so much as she was not expecting it this time. Regardless, we didn't share the name with anyone. When our daughter was born and her name was finally announced, Jess was kind of obsessed with it? I'd how to explain it. She just kept going on and on about how beautiful and unique it was. To this day she comments about how different it is. The name we chose is a pretty common Welsh name which wouldn't be all that different except for the fact that we are African American lol. I've always gravitated towards names from different regions and found and fell in love with the name years ago and never shared it with anyone prior to Kevin. Fast forward to both of us being pregnant at the same time. Jess' odd behavior continued towards me but this time it was more blatant. Snarky comments under the guise of jokes about how big I was going to get with 2 babies and that my body would never snap back like it did after our daughter. She even accused us of getting pregnant on purpose after she announced her own pregnancy even though the whole family knew we were actively trying and at the time of her announcement, I was already a few weeks along and didn't know. One thing about me, introvert or not, I'm no pushover and will stand up for myself. But, I chose to ignore Jess because I knew that would get to her more than confronting her would since she seems to thrive off drama. Jess was obviously much further along than we are, however, we did have our gender reveal prior to Jess giving birth. And right on cue, the baby name interrogation started again. Because they decided not to find out the gender of their baby in advance, Jess kept hounding us for both of the names we had already picked out. But again, we declined to answer. After days of this, I got annoyed and asked Kevin if he thought the reason for her insistence was so she could use the name first since she was due first. He kinda chuckled until he realized I was serious and said he didn't think so but that anything was possible. So I said, let's test it. We were due to host my Phil's birthday at our house a couple weeks later and I decided to leave something in the unfinished nursery with a girl and boy name on it and see if Jess went snooping. Because Kevin thought it was silly, he said he would give me $20 if she did it. So I went onto some site where you can order custom name wall decals and put in the names Aria Rose and Sebastian Ali. These are names that we like but aren't remotely close to what we chose. This will also be our last pregnancy so even if Jess did use them, we wouldn't care. I didn't complete the order. I got to the final page and then printed it out and hid it in a dresser drawer in the nursery. The party goes off but because we were busy hosting, we never noticed if Jess disappeared for any extended period of time. When I went into the nursery the next morning, nothing was out of place and the order sheet was still in the exact location. So we both just went Velp and forgot about it. I did however notice that Jess never asked us about the names again. Then Jess gives birth. We went to the hospital to give our congrats. When we go in and see the baby, I asked what his name was and man, I cannot properly explain the shit-eating grin that came over Jess' face as she says Sebastian Ali. I mean she was really proud of herself and honestly, it's the most vindictive I have ever seen her look in the years I've known her. But instead of reacting how she was expecting, I put on a performance like I had graduated from Juilliard. That's such a great name. He's so cute, look at his whittle face. Oh I just love him so much. Welcome to the world, Sebastian. And he is gonna spoil you rotten. I mean I am laying it on thick without an ounce of bother. The range of emotions on Jess' face went from shock to confusion to rage in a span of maybe 17 seconds. Meanwhile my husband is holding in the laugh of the century. We later say our goodbyes and he gives me a 20 in the elevator while almost crying laughing. All I could say was, like I thought. This was 2 weeks ago and we haven't seen them since because we wanted to give them time to settle in with the new baby. I have heard from my mill that Jess doesn't seem as thrilled about motherhood as she thought she would be considering how long it took them to conceive but said it might just be baby blues. Obviously, I think she's just disappointed that her petty move didn't have the desired effect on us. I did share this with my sister and while she laughed initially, she did say it was kind of an move. Update 1. Jess didn't break into my house to push me down the steps and steal my kid lol. I did get some additional info though that I can pass along. Before I get to that, I want to give a little context about my relationship with Jess to explain why I did what I did. Feel free to skip past it. To put it plainly, Jess and I have been in a one-sided beef since the day Kevin and I started dating. I give her zero thought if I don't have to, and yet, I live rent-free in her mind. Based on snide comments she's made over the years, the reason why is jealousy. Kevin and I dated for only a year before we got engaged. We then were married within 6 months of that engagement. We had an actual wedding with a ceremony and reception, went on a honeymoon, bought a house in the burbs and got pregnant, in rapid succession. Both of us have good careers and are financially stable. Phil and Gmeal all adore me. There is a churchy reason behind this that I will spare you on. Jess and Terrence did not have a similar path. They had been on and off since they were 19-20, with Terrence never really wanting to commit. During one of their breaks, Terrence got a FWB pregnant and now has an 11-year son. This has always been a sore subject with Jess due to her fertility struggles, fibroids. When they finally got back together, she pressed him for marriage until he relented and gave her a shut-up ring. They went to the courthouse on a random Tuesday, then had dinner at Red Lobster afterwards and went back to work the next day. Not trying to be shady, just relaying the facts. They now live in a 2BR apartment in a call city while working hourly jobs. They aren't minimum wage or anything, but constantly need OT to make ends meet. This has led her to resent me over the years. She thinks everything has come easily to me and has let that fester. There was a time a few years ago at a gathering where she got drunk and got into an argument with Terrence. I think her attitude that night stemmed from seeing me with my infant daughter. To hurt him, she blurted out that she married the wrong brother. Everyone was shocked. I wasn't. She just said the quiet part out loud and revealed what I already knew. So I poked her a little and said, "Really, which one? That's kinda gross since both were minors when you met them." Context: Kevin and Terrence also have a younger brother, Tim, 28. Boy, did she fly off the handle after that lol. To this day she claims to have no memory of that night. Anyway, now I know there is a new reason why she resents me. The update: like I said, nothing has really happened since I last posted. I haven't seen or heard from Jess since that day in the hospital. Terrence also hasn't communicated much with Kevin other than sports talk. However, my Mill has been with them almost every day. She came over yesterday to go over some last-minute things for our baby shower that we are having the Saturday after Halloween. I am not due till late January, but with the holidays and twins tending to arrive early, we just wanted to get it out of the way. Anyway, after finalizing some things, I asked Mill how Terrence and Jess were doing. She sighed and leaned back in her chair and said, "Girl, it's a mess." She goes on a long word vomit that I will have to summarize. Basically, they've been at it since before the baby was born. When they were discussing names, Jess' list only consisted of girl names. When Terrence asked what if it's a boy, Jess was adamant that it wouldn't be, but if it was, they would just use Terrence Jr. This caused an argument because Terrence's 11-yo is not named after him and it would be petty to name the second son a junior. Unbeknownst to me, Jess was having severe anxiety over not the name, but the gender of their baby. So much so that she refused to find out early because she was afraid of disappointment and she wanted to enjoy her pregnancy believing she was having a girl. She really wanted a girl. I mean really wanted a girl. This goes back to Mill emo. Mill is the only girl of 4 brothers. She had 3 boys. 2 of her 3 boys, Tim has a 6-yo, have boys. Then my daughter came along. Mill actually broke down in tears at our gender reveal. Since the day she was born, Mill has become a little obsessed with her lol. Not in a Jmeal way. She knows and respects boundaries, but the whole family is aware that my daughter is Mill's favorite person in the world. I think Jess thought that by having a girl, she would get that same attention and affection from Mill as she has never been Jess' biggest fan. When that didn't happen, something short-circuited in her head. Mill's words, not mine. Before we arrived at the hospital that day, they were still fighting over a name. So I guess when I showed up she just blurted it out. While I still think it was to hurt me, it seems like it was also because she didn't allow herself to think of anything else because she didn't want a boy. I said in the first post how I noticed her expression, however I completely failed to notice Terrence's. He was pissed. Jess had never mentioned that name to him prior and he had no clue where it even came from. He also hated it. He refused to sign off on that and they left the hospital without a name. In our state, you only have 7 days from birth to register a name. She eventually told Terrence to pick the name himself and that she didn't care anymore. So he did. He swapped out Sebastian for Jordan but kept Ali. Yes, after Michael and Muhammad lol, according to Mill, since they've been home, Jess has shut down, emotionally. She's been doing all the motherly things, but there's a disconnect there. Mill said she finally broke down to her a few nights ago that she'll likely never have a daughter due to her age and what it took to get pregnant in the first place. I think that will bring them closer together since Mill never got the daughter she wanted either. I also felt bad hearing that because regardless of how I feel about her as a person, I do have a heart and would never want to punch down on her if she's in the throes of PPD. Jess still hasn't admitted to snooping. So I haven't admitted to setting her up. A few comments said I should never confess, but I think I will at some point. Mainly because I don't care lol. I am more than willing to burn a bridge while I'm still standing on it. But now simply isn't the time. So that's it. That's the lackluster update. Jess is invited to my baby shower so I might be back in a couple weeks depending on how that shakes out. Update 2. First, let's rewind to the baby shower I mentioned. I was genuinely unsure how it would go down, especially with Jess being invited. I mean, let's be real, things were tense, but I was kind of curious about what she'd do next. Would she play it cool, act like nothing happened? Or would she be a little more obvious with her drama? Well, my baby's shower came and went, and it was one for the books. Jess showed up, wearing this ridiculously loud outfit, I'm talking neon pink, leopard print, the works, trying to make a statement like she was still in the middle of a midlife crisis. She was so extra the entire time, and it was almost laughable. She wouldn't stop talking about how proud she was of the name Jordan Ali for her son. Yeah, she was still bringing it up. I could see the way she was looking at me, waiting for me to say something, waiting for me to give her the satisfaction of reacting. But you know me by now, I'm cold as ice, so I just smiled, made a few polite comments, and kept it moving. At one point, she did get all passive-aggressive and asked me how my twins were doing, as though she was implying I'd somehow forgotten about them in the midst of this drama. To keep it lighthearted, Kevin and I made sure to announce the gender and name reveal of the twins during the shower, because I'm dramatic like that, and I gotta say, it was a move that had everyone talking. We decided on the names Magnus and Lyra, names we had picked out long before any of this chaos went down. Jess, of course, gave us the fake smile and clapped, but I could see the steam coming out of her ears. She even muttered something about how different our names were, just like Arya and Sebastian were, except this time, she actually seemed uncomfortable, like she didn't know how to respond. I kind of enjoyed watching her squirm, if I'm being honest. But here's where things took a twist. After the shower, things got really weird. Jess started showing up at our house unannounced. At first, I thought it was just to congratulate me on the names or get in some last-minute bonding before the babies arrived, but no. She'd come over to try and subtly remind me about her son's name, like she was waiting for me to acknowledge that she had tried to one-up me with the whole Sebastian thing. She was getting way too comfortable, and I'll admit it, I wasn't having it. The real kicker? One day, she sat me down and tried to guilt-trip me into giving her the name Arya for a second kid. She didn't come right out and say it, of course, but her entire monologue was basically a transparent plea for me to be generous and let her have a shot at the name. I just sat there in complete silence, watching her slowly dig herself into a hole. Finally, I said something like, Jess, you know that's not how names work, right? And then, I just stared at her. Her face went red, and she muttered something about how she was just joking. I could feel her frustration building up, but I wasn't about to give her an inch. And if you're wondering whether she admitted to snooping. Nope. She never did. But Kevin and I had a good laugh when we overheard her talking to Mill a couple of days ago. Apparently, she was telling Mill that she doesn't even know where she got the name Sebastian from and that it just came to her in a dream. I mean, come on. I'm sure it was just another way for her to save face, but it's kind of hilarious to see her scramble to justify it. But here's the thing I didn't expect. Jess broke down to Kevin. She came to him in tears and basically confessed that she's struggling with how perfect everything seems for us. She said she's been comparing her life to mine and Kevin's, and it's made her feel like she's failed in some way. The whole conversation was wild. Kevin told me about it later, and while I almost wanted to feel bad, I couldn't. The truth is, I think she's been so consumed by jealousy and resentment that she hasn't realized how toxic she's become. I almost felt sorry for her, but then I remembered all the petty things she's done to me over the years, and I snapped out of it. And now, Jess has gone radio silent. She hasn't reached out to either of us, and I'm starting to think she's distancing herself because of how much it's really eating at her. Her emotional meltdown about the gender of her baby and the constant one-upping was probably just the surface. Mill says Jess is still in a funk, but I think it's deeper than just baby blues. It sounds like she's having an identity crisis of sorts, and, honestly, I don't know how to feel about it. I don't want to be the one to throw pity at her, she's brought this on herself. As for the whole admitting part, I'm still keeping my secret. No, I'm not going to tell her I set her up with that name. Not yet, anyway. I'm not in a rush. If she ever does confront me about it, and let's be honest, she probably will, I'll be ready with the most nonchalant, "Oh, I thought I told you. I never intended to use those names," and I'll give her the most innocent look I can muster. Maybe she'll be embarrassed, maybe she won't. But either way, I'll have the last laugh. Update 3. Well, things have taken a turn I absolutely did not see coming. Remember how I said Jess went radio silent after her emotional breakdown to Kevin? Yeah, that didn't last long. About 3 weeks ago, I'm at home on bed rest, doctor's orders since I'm now 32 weeks with twins, when I get a text from an unknown number. It's a photo of what looks like a handwritten letter, and when I zoom in, I can make out Sebastian Ali written in what's clearly Jess's handwriting. The message just says found this in mom's attic. Interesting timing, don't you think? I'm confused as hell because I have no idea who sent it or what they're talking about. Then my phone rings. It's Tim, Kevin's youngest brother. He asks if I got his text and explains that he was helping Mill clean out some old boxes when he found a folder labeled baby names that apparently belonged to Jess from years ago, like, before she even got pregnant. Sebastian Ali was written on a piece of paper dated from last year, along with a bunch of other names. Here's where it gets wild. Tim said he confronted Jess about it because he remembered the whole hospital drama, and she completely broke down. She admitted that she'd been planning to use that name for over a year, way before she even knew I was pregnant with twins. She said she'd researched it, loved the meaning, and had her heart set on it. But then she overheard Kevin and me talking about keeping our names secret and got paranoid that we might somehow use her name first. So she did go snooping in my nursery, found what she thought was confirmation of her worst fears, and decided to announce it first as a preemptive strike. Except, it was my trap. She played herself with a name she actually wanted to use anyway. But wait, it gets messier. Tim also drops this bombshell that he'd been suspicious of Jess for a while because she'd been texting him. A lot. Like, way more than a sister-in-law should be texting her husband's little brother. He shows me some of the messages and they're flirty. Not overtly sexual, but definitely crossing lines. Things like I bet you'd be a better father than your brothers and you always know how to make me laugh when T doesn't. I'm sitting there processing this when Tim tells me the real kicker. Jess had asked him to meet her for coffee to talk about family stuff the week before she gave birth. He didn't go, but she kept pushing. After she had the baby, she texted him saying she was disappointed in how her life turned out and that she wondered what would have happened if she'd chosen differently. Kevin walks in right as I'm having this conversation and sees my face. When I fill him in, he goes quiet in that scary way he does when he's really angry. He immediately calls Terrence, and I can hear shouting from both ends of the phone. Apparently, Terrence had no idea about the texting and was furious. The next day, Jess shows up at our house uninvited again, but this time she's crying and looks like she hasn't slept in days. She begs to talk to me alone, and against my better judgment, I let her in. She sits on my couch and just word vomits everything. She admits to snooping. She admits to the texting. She admits that she's been obsessed with my life and convinced herself that she deserved what I have. But then she says something that made my blood run cold. I know you set me up with those names. I figured it out weeks ago. You wanted me to look stupid, and it worked. I just stared at her. She continues, but the thing is, I actually love that name. I'd picked it out myself. So when I saw it in your nursery, I thought you'd somehow found out and were going to steal it from me. I was so angry and hurt that I had to say it first. She starts crying harder and says, I've ruined everything. Terrence barely talks to me. The baby doesn't even feel like mine because I can't stop thinking about how I wanted a girl. And now everyone thinks I'm crazy because I stole a name that was mine to begin with. I'm not going to lie, for a split second, I almost felt bad for her. Almost. But then she looks at me with this desperate expression and says, I need you to tell everyone that you knew I wanted that name, that you set me up on purpose. It's the only way I can explain this without looking completely insane. And that's when I realized she wasn't there to apologize or come clean. She was there to try to manipulate me into taking the blame for her own actions. The audacity was breathtaking. I told her no. I told her that her obsession with my life wasn't my problem, and that I wasn't going to bail her out of a situation she created. I also told her that her texting Tim was inappropriate and that she needed to stay away from my family. She left angry, and I haven't heard from her since. But the fallout has been intense. Terrence has been staying at his mom's house with the baby. Mill is caught in the middle and stressed out. Kevin is barely speaking to his brother because he thinks Terrence should have kept Jess in check years ago. The craziest part? Yesterday, Tim called to tell me that Jess had texted him one more time. She said she was done pretending to be someone she's not and that she was going to make some changes. He has no idea what that means, but honestly, neither do I. I'm due in less than 2 months, and the last thing I need is more drama. But something tells me this isn't over. Jess is unraveling, and I have a feeling she's going to do something desperate before this is all said and done. Kevin thinks I should have just admitted to the name trap from the beginning and avoided all this mess, but I disagree. This was never really about the names. It was about years of jealousy and resentment that were bound to explode eventually. I just happened to be the one holding the match when it did. Update 4. I honestly thought things couldn't get any weirder after my last update, but here we are. I'm now 36 weeks pregnant, and let me tell you, the past month has been absolutely unhinged. So remember how Jess said she was done pretending and going to make some changes? Well, turns out, those changes involved her packing up and leaving Terrence. Just straight up disappeared one morning while he was at work, taking the baby with her. Left a note saying she needed space to figure out who she really is and that she'd be staying with her sister in another state. Terrence was devastated. He came to our house that night looking like he'd aged 10 years, asking if we knew where she went. Kevin and I were honestly shocked. I mean, I knew she was spiraling, but I never thought she'd actually leave her newborn's father. But here's where it gets really messy. 3 days after she left, Tim gets a call from Jess. She's crying, saying she made a mistake and wants to come home, but she needs him to drive out and get her because she doesn't have money for gas. Tim, being the good guy he is, was about to say yes when she drops this bomb. I always wondered what it would be like to be with someone who actually wanted me. From the beginning. Tim immediately calls Kevin, and we're all like, what the hell? She's basically confessing feelings while stranded in another state with a baby. Kevin drives out there with Tim to get her, but I guess the car ride back was tense as hell. Jess kept trying to get Tim to sit in the back with her to help with the baby, and Kevin had to shut that down real quick. When they got back, Terrence was waiting at Mill's house. The reunion was awkward. Jess barely looked at him, but she was all smiles and thank yous toward Tim. Even Mill noticed and pulled me aside later to say something felt off about the whole situation. That was 2 weeks ago. Since then, things have been relatively quiet, but I could tell something was brewing. Jess has been doing this thing where she'll text the family group chat about the baby, but she'll specifically tag Tim in her messages. Like, Jordan smiled today, at Tim you'd love to see it, or thanks for the baby clothes recommendation at Tim, you have such good taste. Kevin and I were talking about how weird it was when my phone buzzes with a text from Terrence. He's asking if Kevin can come over because he needs to talk to someone. When Kevin gets there, Terrence is holding a bunch of printed screenshots. Turns out, he'd been going through the phone records and found that Jess had been calling Tim almost daily, sometimes, for hours at a time, even when Terrence was home. But the real kicker? He found a voicemail she'd left Tim last week. In it, she's crying and saying that she thinks she fell for the wrong brother and that she's been living a lie for years. She says she knows Tim would never betray Terrence, but she can't stop thinking about what could have been. Terrence played it for Kevin, and Kevin came home looking like he'd seen a ghost. He was furious, not just at Jess but at the whole situation. He felt like his family was being torn apart by this woman's delusions. The next day, Kevin calls a family meeting. Mill, Phil, all three brothers, and their partners, except Jess, who wasn't invited. Kevin plays the voicemail for everyone, and you could hear a pin drop. Mill starts crying, Phil is pissed, and Tim looks like he wants to crawl under a rock. Tim finally speaks up and admits that he's been feeling guilty about not shutting down Jess's behavior sooner. He says he thought he was being supportive during a difficult time, but he realizes now that she was manipulating the situation. He also drops this bombshell. Jess had texted him the night before asking him to meet her at a coffee shop to talk about the family situation. Kevin loses it. He tells Tim that he needs to block Jess's number and that if she continues this behavior, they're going to have to involve lawyers. Terrence is sitting there looking defeated, and I honestly felt bad for him. This woman has basically destroyed his family. But wait, there's more. Yesterday, I'm at home resting when I get a knock at the door. It's Jess, and she looks terrible. Hair unwashed, clothes wrinkled, dark circles under her eyes. She asks if she can come in, and I reluctantly let her. She sits down and immediately starts crying. She says she knows everyone hates her and that she's ruined everything. But then she looks at me with this desperate expression and says, I need you to understand something. I never meant for any of this to happen. I've been so unhappy for so long, and watching you of everything I wanted just broke something in me. I'm sitting there, heavily pregnant and exhausted, listening to this woman have a breakdown in my living room. She continues, Tim is the only one who's been kind to me through all of this. He listens to me, he makes me feel like I'm not crazy. And I know it's wrong, but I think I've fallen in love with him. My jaw hits the floor. She's actually admitting to being in love with her husband's brother. I ask her what she expects me to do with this information, and she says, I want you to help me figure out how to fix this. You're smart, you always know what to do. Help me figure out how to make this right. I looked at her for a long moment and said, Jess, the only way to make this right is to stop. Stop texting Tim. Stop creating drama. Stop trying to manipulate everyone around you. Get some help, focus on your baby, and try to save your marriage. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. Then she says, but what if I can't? What if I'm too far gone? And honestly, looking at her in that moment, I thought she might be. She left shortly after that, but not before saying something that's been bothering me ever since. You know, if things were different, if I'd made different choices, maybe Tim and I could have been happy together. Maybe I would have had the life you have. I haven't told Kevin about this conversation yet. I'm not sure if I should. Part of me thinks Jess is having some kind of breakdown and needs professional help. But another part of me is worried about what she might do next. She's clearly obsessed with this fantasy life she's created in her head, and I have a feeling she's going to do something drastic to try to make it reality. Tim has been radio silent since the family meeting, which I think is probably for the best. But I can't shake the feeling that this is far from over. Jess is unraveling completely, and I'm afraid of what she might do when she finally snaps. Update 5. I'm writing this from the hospital, and before anyone panics, the babies are fine. I'm fine. But everything else? Not so much. I went into labor at 37 weeks, which isn't unusual for twins, but the timing couldn't have been worse. Kevin was at work when my water broke, and I called him in a panic. He was rushing home when he got rear-ended at a red light. Nothing serious, but enough to total his car and leave him stranded across town while I'm having contractions every 5 minutes. I called Mill, but she was at the grocery store and said she'd be there in 20 minutes. That's when I made the mistake of calling Tim. He was the closest family member, and I was desperate. He dropped everything and got to our house in 10 minutes, helped me grab my hospital bag, and drove me to the hospital while I breathed through contractions. The labor was intense but quick. Magnus arrived first at 6:47 p.m., followed by Lyra at 7:02 p.m. Both healthy, both perfect. Kevin made it to the hospital just as they were cleaning up Lyra, and I've never seen him look more relieved and guilty at the same time. Tim stayed until Kevin arrived, then quietly left. I thought that was the end of it, but I was wrong. The next morning, I'm in my hospital room nursing the babies when there's a soft knock. I expected it to be a nurse, but it was Jess. She looked better than when I'd seen her last, clean hair, fresh clothes, but there was something different about her eyes. Something determined. I came to congratulate you, she said, holding a small gift bag. And to apologize. I was too tired to argue, so I let her sit down. She cooed over the babies for a few minutes, saying all the right things, but I could tell she was working up to something. I heard Tim brought you to the hospital, she said finally, not looking at me. Kevin got in an accident. Tim was just helping. He's a good man, she said quietly. Better than either of his brothers, if I'm being honest. I stared at her. Jess, don't. I know you think I'm crazy. Maybe I am, but I can't stop thinking about him. About what might have been. She looked at me directly then. I'm leaving Terrence. My blood ran cold. What? I already talked to a lawyer. I'm filing for divorce. I can't keep pretending anymore. Jess, you have a newborn. You can't just, I can't keep living a lie, she said, louder than she meant to. Then she lowered her voice. I've been miserable for years. Terrence doesn't love me, not really. He married me because I pressured him into it. But Tim sees me. Tim is being polite. He's not interested in you romantically. She smiled then, and it was the most unsettling thing I'd ever seen. That's what I thought too. Until yesterday. I felt like the room was spinning. What happened yesterday? I went to his apartment. I needed to thank him for helping you, and one thing led to another. I stared at her in horror. You're lying. I'm not. He was hesitant at first, kept saying it was wrong, but I could tell he's been feeling the same way. We talked for hours. He held me while I cried about how trapped I felt in my marriage. And then she trailed off, but her meaning was clear. I couldn't breathe. Tim wouldn't do that. He wouldn't betray Terrence. People do crazy things when they're in love, she said softly. He told me he's had feelings for me for years but never acted on them out of loyalty to Terrence. But last night, he said he can't ignore it anymore. The room was spinning. I hit the call button for the nurse, suddenly feeling nauseous. I wanted you to know before I tell the family, Jess continued. Tim and I are going to be together. He's going to help me through the divorce, and then we're going to start fresh. Maybe move somewhere new. A nurse came in, took one look at my face, and asked Jess to leave. Jess gathered her things, but before she left, she turned back to me. I know this is hard to hear. But for the first time in years, I'm happy. Really happy. And I think Tim is too. After she left, I immediately called Kevin. He was in the parking garage and came running up. When I told him what Jess had said, he went pale. She's lying, he said immediately. Tim wouldn't do that. Then call him. Kevin dialed Tim's number. It went straight to voicemail. He tried 3 more times. Same thing. Maybe his phone is dead, Kevin said, but he didn't sound convinced. We tried to focus on the babies, but the tension was killing us. That evening, Terrence came to visit. He looked exhausted, and I could tell he'd been crying. Have you talked to Tim today? Kevin asked carefully. Terrence's face crumpled. She told you? My heart sank. So it's true? I don't know what's true anymore, Terrence said. She came home this morning with divorce papers, said she's been having an affair with Tim for weeks. But when I called him, he denied it. Said they've never been physical, but he admitted he has feelings for her. Kevin looked like he'd been punched. What exactly did he say? That he's sorry, that he never meant for it to happen, but he thinks he's in love with her. He said they've been talking every day since she left me the first time, and somewhere along the way, it became more than friendship, but he denied sleeping with her? He said they kissed. Once. Yesterday, when she went to his apartment. But he swears that's all. He said he immediately regretted it and told her they couldn't do this. I felt a tiny bit of relief, but then Terrence continued. But here's the thing, Jess is telling everyone they slept together. She's been calling people all day, saying she's leaving me for Tim and that they're in love. She even called my mom. What did Mill say? She hung up on her, but then she called me crying, asking how this could happen. Kevin was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I need to talk to Tim. Good luck. He's not answering anyone's calls. After Terrence left, Kevin and I sat in silence. The babies were sleeping in their little bassinets, and for a moment, everything felt peaceful. But I knew it was the calm before the storm. Do you think she's lying about sleeping with him? I asked. I don't know. But even if she is, the damage is done. She's blown up the family either way. As if on cue, Kevin's phone buzzed. It was a text from Tim. I'm sorry. I need some time to think. Don't try to contact me. Kevin showed me the message, and I felt my heart break for him. His little brother, who he'd always protected, was in the middle of destroying their family. What are we going to do? I asked. I don't know, Kevin said. But I have a feeling this is just the beginning. He was right. This morning, I got a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of Tim and Jess at what looked like a restaurant, sitting close together, her hand on his arm. The message said, thought you should know they're not hiding anymore. I haven't shown Kevin yet. He's been so happy with the babies, and I don't want to ruin that. But I have a feeling I won't be able to keep this from him much longer. Jess is playing a dangerous game, and I'm afraid she's going to destroy everyone in her path, before she's done. The worst part? I think she's just getting started.